Chapter 9 In Westminster Palace. Tom was in bed in Westminster Palace. It was morning. Two gentlemen stood by the side of the prince's bed. "Your Majesty," said the first gentleman. "It's 8 o'clock, Your Majesty," said the second gentleman. At first, Tom thought that he was in the room in Pudding Lane, and that his mother was calling him to get up. Then he opened his eyes and saw the two gentlemen standing by the side of his bed. "Your Majesty." "What?" said Tom. "Does Your Majesty wish to rise?" "Do you mean, do I want to get up?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "Yes," said Tom, "I do. Bring my clothes." One gentleman brought Tom's underclothes into the room and gave them to a second gentleman, and the second gentleman gave them to a third gentleman, and the third gentleman helped Tom to get into his underclothes. Then the first gentleman brought his shirt and gave it to the second gentleman, and the second gentleman gave it to the third gentleman, and the third gentleman put the shirt on Tom. And this was done with each thing. Tom went into another room to have his breakfast. One servant brought the food into the room and gave it to a second servant, and the second servant gave it to a third servant, and the third servant put it on the table. A fourth servant and a fifth servant just stood behind Tom's chair and did nothing. After breakfast, a gentleman came and said, "Lord Hertford wishes to speak with the king." Then Lord Hertford asked if His Majesty was ready to go to the council chamber, a big room where meetings were held. Tom sat in a high chair covered with gold at the end of the room. Men came and bowed and kissed his hand and read from long pieces of paper. This went on for hour after hour. "When will this end?" he thought. "I wish I could go and play ball or go for a swim in the river." At last Tom learned that it was time for dinner. He went into another great hall. It was nearby, as big as the Guildhall, and there were as many servants. Tom thought that the dinner would never end. After this, he thought, "I can go and play or swim." But after dinner he had to go and write Edward on one paper after another. He did not know what was written in the papers, and he didn't care. He saw how the real Edward had written his name, and he made his writing just the same. In the evening there was another great dinner. When at last Tom went to bed, he said to himself, "The clothes are beautiful, and it's a beautiful house, and the food is nice, but I don't like being king. I wish I could go back to Pudding Lane and play with the other boys and swim in the river."